Okay, let's take a look at the project menu and take a look at the memory setup. I'm not really sure if any of these settings matter or in what way they might matter, but I want to be very clear as to how I have them set up for this demo. While researching for this video, I experienced more than a few odd things that I can't quite explain. So this is some external audio coming in from the Machinedrum, just a nice little 1-bar pattern. This is a flex machine set up as an audio pass-through. If you'd like to learn more about this technique, click the card that just popped up. Notice that the record trig has no micro timing. Using a flex machine as an audio pass-through like this does result in a bit of a glitch at the end of the loop, but in this particular use case you can't really hear it. There's already a good amount of high-frequency content that serves to mask the click. With this live input configuration, I'm able to pitch down the incoming audio. Since we're down an octave now, we're only playing through the first half of what gets recorded into the buffer. If you slow down the audio before the buffer gets re-triggered, you're able to get some pitch up action for a little bit of time. Oopsie, I bumped the start position. That's definitely not going to help with playback of live audio. So it cut out there once the pitched up playback cursor sped past the end of the buffer. If I quickly revert this to the default pitch, you'll hear a bit of mistiming until the buffer gets re-triggered on the next bar. Now I'm going to go in and put a little bit of micro timing on the record trig. This displacement of the relationship between the record trig and the playback trig allows for some extra opportunities. As you can see in this use case, playback is disabled when pitching down, but now we seem to be able to pitch up the incoming audio. Since we're now playing back a 16-step recording up an octave, it only occupies 8 steps. For some reason, the flex machine setup loop behavior does not allow it to loop. So the easiest alternative is to simply re-trigger the buffer on step 9. It's important to note that this micro-timing displacement relationship between the record head and the playback head does not really result in live input coming through. What you're doing is essentially playing back the previous bar's 16-step recording before it gets replaced by the newest recording. So now that we've covered pitching up and pitching down, what about reverse? Well, that didn't work very well, did it? The example where I pitch up the incoming audio shows that we can play from a part of the record buffer that was recorded on the previous pass. When the rate is reversed, the start control is also reversed. So a negative rate with a start point of 0 should start at the end of the buffer. However, when playing back from a live recording buffer, that playback position at the end of the buffer is not valid for very long, and you only get a click. Similarly, when the reversed playback head and the new record head meet in the middle, playback stops as well. But with a slight start position adjustment, we can re-trigger the reversed playback relatively seamlessly. As far as I'm aware, this is the closest you can get to reversing incoming audio on the Octatrack. Of course, it's a bit off due to the fudging of the start times, but it's still very interesting. Combining raising the pitch with the reversing is also very interesting, but throws another wrench into the works. I'll leave it as an exercise for the viewer to grapple with this problem. Okay, let's take that back to the bass pitch and look at the audio editor. You can clearly see that audio is being played back from quote-unquote empty buffer. Sometimes, when using a different track's recording buffer, there's a display quirk where you can see the quote-unquote empty part of the waveform in the editor. But I have not figured out exactly what causes this behavior or how to consistently repeat it. So now that we've examined the effects of micro-timed record trigs on live input, let's take a look to see how this differs when we use the source 3 recording source instead of the A, B, or C, D inputs. I already have tracks 6 and 7 set to record from track 5 as their source 3. On track 6 we're doing pitched up playback, a little bit of a filter to distinguish it from the original audio. A source 3 record trig is displaced in time similar to micro-timing a record trig on a live input. However, this displacement is a little bit smaller We'll take a look at the record trig, and you can see there's no micro timing, but we're still able to pitch up the playback. The nice part about using a source 3 recording is that then the transformations of the track playback and track effects will be applied. Oops, looks like I forgot to turn off the micro timing of the live input recording track. So now just the first half of the bar is being sent into track 6 and then being pitched up. Muck with that pitch a bit. Let's mix in the source now. Pretty sloppy, but pretty interesting too. Now I'll take the source track back to default. Time to give a listen to track 7. This is set up for reverse playback and adds a good bit of chorus and reverb. It's always interesting to me to hear how these transformed versions mix with the original source. Try pitching down the source now. Now to bring in the octave up channel. Pretty cool how a relatively small amount of transformation on that input can result in something very different, especially once there's some differentiation between the layers. With the live resampling that's going on, a relatively insignificant scene change can have very big downstream effects. I have a lot of fun with this type of setup, just changing the different time relationships. We'll take a look at the playback setup of these flex machines. On this machine, you can see that I have timestretch on. Generally speaking, timestretch is going to make it a bit harder for you to make sure you can play back from your live recording buffers. However, in certain instances, it does offer some possibilities. In order to accurately discuss what's happening with the timestretch and how it can be used, I need to do some more research myself. When actually working on music, I often try not to care too much about why something sounds the way it does and just focus on the sound itself. This is the simplest version of these techniques, and it's very easy to get tripped up and confused while attempting to try new things. Also note that these techniques of pitching up and reversing incoming audio are also possible on the Machinedrum UW. Since the Machinedrum lacks explicit microtiming, the implementation is a bit different. Check the card that just popped up if you're curious. Take this down a couple semitones. Want to hear that reverb track by itself for a moment? Try taking the source back to default pitch. You may notice that I only have 3 active recording buffers in this particular project. That's because when I was researching for this and setting up this project, I found out that having more than about 4 or 5 active recording buffers slows down the refresh rate of the waveform in the audio editor. Time to try pitching down the incoming audio again. Another important note about these techniques is that since a lot of them rely on the previous pass of the recording head, you can't simply start up the Octatrack sequencer and expect these to work immediately until at least one pass of recording has occurred. Time to adjust the filter on track 5. I'll engage that delay also. Although I don't need to do it in this example, adding a delay to a live resampling playback channel is a useful way to fill in the gap sometimes when playback cuts out for whatever reason. Reverbs are also useful for filling in the gaps, and filters and EQs are very useful for reducing the clicking artifacts. Another detail that I noticed while researching for this video is that when you stop the sequencer, whatever record buffers have recorded up to that recording pass will be saved, but any of the invisible recording that you have for previous passes will be truncated. This is another reason why there needs to be at least one pass of the recording head before these techniques will generally begin to work properly. Taking track 6 and turning the pitch all the way down. Since this is a source 3 recording track, the first trigger is no longer activating properly. Maybe I'll P-lock these triggers a bit differently. Oh, that start position isn't going to be very helpful. When you have a more complex trigger pattern playing back from a live recording buffer, you can often set various P-locks to ensure playback at certain positions in the sequence. The speed of the sample playback and the direction of the sample playback, along with the start position, are often going to be the first parameters you want to take a look at in relationship to where the recording head is at. A more advanced technique involves the use of careful modulation in order to dynamically change the start position on your triggers. I'm going to move this pitch back to default and then remove the pitch P-locks. So track 6 is no longer pitching up. And let's check to see what that scene does. Okay, let's slow it all down now. Going to put the octave up back on track 6. Time to try a more even delay time. And adjust the filter. Going to dial in the delay now to be slightly less messy. Ooh, yeah, that's getting dark. Now to try some different pitching on the source track. That octave down is pretty cool. I'm going back to it. So even with the completely static 1-bar input, we can go pretty far from our original source material. Let's take a look at those buffers and see what they're doing.